Hi guys, my name is Olga Noel and I make ball jointed dolls. It's no secret that hands and feet are the greatest asset in attention grabbing for any figurative sculpture, and ball jointed dolls have a great variety of different gestures. Hands and feet are expressive, they show intention and your dedication to learn anatomy. They show that you've been thinking about how your doll is going to pose, how they, meaning the doll, are perceived, and what emotions they convey with their body movement. Because every single time the movement is done, the hands and feet for your doll are adding the context or adding this movement, adding to the flow, or they don't. On the background, you see me restoring the feet and hands in resin, and all the tools that I'm going to use to make hands and feet feel more alive. Casting often is the pretty detail of skin creases, and I'm bringing it back so that the expression is more believable. I'll try commenting on some things that I use that might need explanation, but now that I'm getting ready for casting resin dolls myself, and before I figure out exactly what I want to do for my next resin step, I want to reflect on the way I chose these particular doll parts to be present in my first resin collection and see where we're heading with my next one. Back when I started my journey, the limbs in general were mainly doll parts. Everything was just parts and sort of a hindrance on my road to destined success. I tried achieving something great, capital G, without thinking about the essence at all. What was inside this box of greatness, I had no idea, but I really desperately wanted to just grab it, open it, and be the best. I remember I was fascinated by others and by their dolls, and I just wanted to make it mine. The skill, the way they look, the particular representation, I wanted to eat it all and then give birth to something even bigger. I understand that this is not the kind of imagery I wanted to put out there, but this is basically how I felt. This hunger gives me honest to God goosebumps to this day. I was very inspired and very reckless, as much as you can be plunging into art with no degree, no support, and basically no plan. I just wanted it, and I wanted it yesterday. Now my process is similar. I still view dolls as parts, but the approach itself, while I sculpt, is very much different. I now want those parts to be perfect on their own, like chocolate sweets, and then I string them as you saw in last week's video, and I work on the harmony. But with this approach, where does hands and feet planning go? This is my treasured skill, and I want to share it with you. It's nothing unique. The answer is it just never stops happening. We see bodies every day, but for some reason it's not okay to walk around naked and feed the insatiable anatomy consumption needs of others. It would be a great help to artists if everyone did that. But clothes more often than not gets in the way, especially if you live in a colder climate. For like warmer climate people, it's way easier, especially if you live near a significant body of water where you can go and just look at people, look at how their scapula work or their biceps, triceps, the whole variety of different body types and body motions and movement itself. This is great practice. And knowing that there is no way to just get everybody naked and look at their interesting anatomy, you can also count on hands that are almost always there for you to observe. Feet, less common but still achievable, and a bit more pervy if done right, but it honestly can't be helped. You need to study people's hands, faces, feet, bodies, and sometimes the best way is to touch them. I understand that it is quite a stretch for a lot of people, but still it really is very important. I once asked my partner to just pose for me because I couldn't understand the pronation, supination, and the middle ground for the forearm. And my partner, they don't really like the way I touch the hand itself, the way I tried to touch the muscles, and I unfortunately held a knife in my hand, and yeah, they swatted at a knife or like a scalpel that I was using to sculpt the doll's forearm. That was a very, very unfortunate situation that, like, I warn people, do, if you touch bodies, do not hold knives in your hands. Yeah, embarrassing. Okay, so the hardest part for this process, it comes when I sit down and start sculpting, because the decision to freeze some pose or gesture and sculpt it, or in my case to freeze a special feet position that is more common for a dancer than for just a regular human being, this decision sort of forces you to commit, and this commitment needs to be honored from start to finish. And in my case, I told about it countless times, but I've been sculpting this boy doll for 3 years already, and for 3 years I've been committed to one gesture, one hand gesture and one feet gesture. And later on, one of my patrons persuaded me to create a standing feet pair for him, and I created it. So 2 basically feet position and 1 hand position for 3 years, and for 1 extra year at a minimum, because porcelain is hard. So once you are committed to a certain gesture, you cannot change it. You cannot unfreeze the moment and create something. Well, you can create something new, no questions asked. But the thing about this is, when you freeze this gesture, when you want to capture a certain emotion with your doll's hands, it sort of forces you to create this connection between you, your thought, your art process, and the result. And if you committed to something that you don't really like, you try to rework it time and time again. For me personally, I'm 100% happy with what I got, and I'm also happy with what I got for my girl doll for resin that you're going to see here in this longer video. But yeah, sometimes I don't really like what's happening. I hated this hand gesture. I straight out hated it, and I didn't like it, and I don't want for this hand gesture to ever appear near my dolls again. This is why I used the same mold for these hands, but I resculpted them in raw porcelain, and I like them way more than I did these. So yeah, settling on one gesture, on one particular pose is painful, but necessary. And I now realize that I have a favorite thing about every gesture I have ever sculpted over the years, and I hate a couple of more. For example, the first porcelain dolls that I created, I made sort of open hand, stiff hand, and the idea behind it was super cool. I really liked how it happened on this picture. But unfortunately, in the long run, this gesture is just a little bit too stiff for ball jointed dolls and for any sculpture in general. But I really liked how I played with it, how, like, my idea, my first art steps had this point where I created this doll and I created her the way I did. Also, some people make jointed hands and feet to add to the movement or to the range of motion for the doll. I'm not there yet. Maybe in 3D, as soon as I learn how to do it, I'll try. But in traditional sculpting, I really enjoy freezing the moment, stretching the pose, bonifying the gesture, and making it as believable as possible, and sort of inserting this gesture, these like hands, the frozen hands basically, into every single gesture that the doll is capable of making. And this flow, the body movement flow that continues on and lives through the hand gesture or the feet gesture, is really the thing that can make or break your doll. I guess you know that, but when you sculpt a doll, especially a ball jointed doll, you are not just designing an anatomically correct tiny human copy. You use a lot of knowledge and balance. You need to force the body to be in harmony with all those ball joints, which is really hard because we do have ball joints, we do have hinge joints and that sort of thing, but human beings are much more complicated things. walking organisms. And for us, for our eyes, for our brain to believe that the doll might be a tiny human or might move when we close our eyes, it takes a lot of skill. And you need to foresee body posing. And you also need to sort of foresee how people are going to play with your doll. Sometimes happy accidents happen. For example, you've designed something and for you it didn't really work, you didn't really like it, but some person started to play with your doll and their unique vision, and this is why I absolutely, to bits and pieces, adore doll collectors. Some people start playing with your doll and their unique vision create this ethereal moment, almost like I cannot even explain how I feel when I see people making pictures and playing with my dolls. For me personally, it's sort of like it's mind-blowing, honestly. And having sold over, 50 dolls, for me, I have this opportunity to ask people for feedback, for, pictures, for how they are playing with their dolls, with my dolls in their houses. And this just blows my mind because the balance that I put in, the poses that I foresaw, they're just completely breaking it and building something new and something beautiful. So if you're a doll collector, I can say that wholeheartedly I adore you and I adore your experiences. You are great, and thank you so much for existing and bringing those dolls to life with your own unique vision. Back to the topic. A lot of people, a lot of doll artists make certain choices that often reveal things they can't easily articulate. For example, they start projecting unconsciously their own sense of movement, their own sense of flow in the world, certain restrictions, and sometimes they add this extra layer of freedom they wish they had, or they do indeed have. And this freedom, this movement, this extra range of motion can be really revealing and can actually show what the artist is like, what the artist is all about. For example, a sculptor who feels like more grounded, more confident, often makes dolls with more solid looking feet, more solid looking posture, and there is a lot more balance in their figures. On the contrary, someone who feels a little bit unstable or constrained, someone who feels that they cannot stand on their 2 feet, sometimes they create dolls that more unstable on their feet. They can't stand without support. And yeah, sometimes I feel that my choice of feet really reflects this beauty without stability. And it's a pretty interesting concept. It's pretty interesting thing to know that like some people, they don't even sculpt feet, straight up nothing, or hooves or something like this. And I'm really wondering what is behind this choice. And this is what I came up with. Basically, like this embodied projection is something that I feel my interest in. Also, I feel that body language that we grant our dolls tells a lot about us as authors. We can tell a lot about a person that is sitting across from us from their, head tilt, for example, or if their knee is bouncing or how they arch their back. Every single thing shows this like personality of a person. For example, if a person is really retrospective or they have droopy eyelids, we often make assumptions about them. I'm not saying that this is a 100% true assumption about a person, or for example, their leg bounces, maybe they have ADHD and they're really bored, or their leg bounces because they're really nervous. A lot of things there. But when you start unpacking it and when you start to dive into those I would say into preconceived notions about other people, and you start portraying them the way you see them, your hands and feet sort of support your theory. For example, more childlike hands or hand gesture can create this more of a childlike personality for your doll. Also, making a doll stand is partly a really cool technical challenge because you're creating something that needs a lot of balance, and it also has a lot of symbolism. Some artists need their dolls to stand. This is like an act of establishing control, of proving themselves right, of proving their body joints work as intended, and they repeat the human body movement. Some artists just sculpt the way they feel, and for example, for me personally, in this case, for the boy doll, it happened like this. I created a doll, I created ballet feet, and when one of my patrons asked me to make flat feet, I made them, and I shrunk him with flat feet, and he just stood because the balance was normal, the balance was there, and I just felt how it should have been, and it was like this. And with flat feet, he was just standing. It wasn't any particular notion behind it. I was 100% afraid that I'm going to string him with flat feet and he's going to just topple and fall over. It didn't happen. He stands fine because anatomy is there. And I really like that a lot of artists nowadays more drawn to poses that sort of defy this balance notion. Like, they want to freeze this fragility of the posture. They want to show the body in motion, especially important for ball jointed dolls because they can move, but they can't move on their own. They need to feel alive. They need to be sort of living, breathing things in any gesture, in any pose that art collector or ball jointed doll collector are going to put them in. So yeah, I feel that the choice of certain gestures, the choice of certain ways how people sculpt their dolls can be read as like subconscious, either self-portraits or cries for help, or just ways to project what's inside of you. As for any other artists, ball jointed doll artists are no different. The ability or inability to make a doll stand, the way that feet press into the ground, the way that the person wants to show you every single crease, or the way that the doll needs a doll stand to just hover above ground. All of these can be tiny confessions that artists probably didn't want to do or didn't do consciously, but every single choice might be about them, about their own world. So I feel that deciding or settling on something like choosing flat feet for my next doll or ballerina feet for them again might create this unique perspective, not only for you who consumes my art via content or buys my dolls or just admires from afar, and for me. So I really want to explore, what choice should I make? By diving into this topic, I decided to bring some more intention into the whole hand sculpting thing and fit sculpting thing and make a couple of new choices for resin, as I mentioned. I want to make a more open but still a bit shy character, which means tucked thumbs, a bit gathered fingers, and a bit of a cupped palm. Opposite to this is open palm for honesty, free thumbs for more confidence, and the hand gesture that leads with an index finger. This shows a little bit of leading or beckoning or an overall more stable approach there. As for the feet, I still want to make dolls that need support or a doll stand. I feel like these feet that you saw here were nearly perfect. I would change a couple of things, but they do look great, if a bit too determined. For now, I'd love to keep experimenting with unstable feet poses and pull it a bit in a different direction. I want to portray a bit of a yearning and vulnerability that comes with it, so maybe more of soft shapes, toes, some lifted, some curled inside, maybe a little bit of a flexed arch of the feet, but not as determined as I sculpted here. I have very dexterous feet, so I can move every toe practically, so this makes sense to me, and I know that not everyone is capable of doing this, but adding this pinch of character is something I never expected to do, but I really want to. Opposite to this is feet standing flat for stability, lifted heels and flexed toes for hope. At least I see hope this way. Weight collapsed on outer edges of the feet for unsteady or a bit of like an indecision, and the dancer feet poses for determination to reflect beautiful technique and be a little bit more pointy, less approachable. Every single choice has their place, and I feel that by making these choices right now, I'm sort of predetermining how my beautiful doll is going to convey emotions, and I really want to experiment with it, sort of leave those frames that I've built myself and that I've built for myself. I have already felt this like need to change things a bit with the beginners videos that we saw like in the beginning of September, in the end of August, where I sculpted softer faces, a little bit more of open eyes, and this is the feeling that I want to keep, that I want to hold close and to give birth to in my next resin collection. Also, there are some practical things I keep repeating to myself while I work on feet and hands. I never leave fingers straight. Every single one has a micro curve, and I added and exaggerated 100%. It's not lifelike, but I want to sort of magnify it for this tiny scale so that a person who's looking at it knows exactly what I'm talking about or what I thought when I sculpted it. I also preserve a lot of planes of knuckles. I don't sand everything down. I add more creases, more greediness, and those planes catch light, and in certain lighting they really give this lifelike feeling. Next thing is I test things. Sometimes changing just one thing is not enough. I really do need to start from scratch, and testing helps me get it, and I often do start from scratch. This is a real thing. This is a real struggle. And this last thing is more of a today's surprising advice. Try starting with emotion. This emotion will add this umami flavor to the balanced, beautiful doll you are making. This is it. Thank you for being here with me, staying over for both the talk and sending. I'm so sorry that at some point I went into some deep psychological things. I'm just really interested in it, and I'm really interested in what I'm going to sculpt, and in my next chapter this is why I try to approach it with more stability, and I want to support myself in the future by making those decisions early on and just relying on my technique to produce the result I want. If you have any questions about the tools I used here, ask away. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join my beautiful patrons that receive too little love these days. I'm going to do better at creating things soon, I promise. I just need a little breather after this huge trip I had. Now I feel more rested and ready to go, so I will share more, 100%. So yes, thank you guys for watching. Have the best day, bye!